Welcome back to the channel, Lessons from the Homeroom. I'm so excited that you've joined us today. This is another part to our poetry series. If you did not start with us at Introduction to Poetry, please pause the video and go back down to our very first video on poetry called Introduction to Poetry. Now, those of you who have returned, welcome back. I'm so excited you're here and thank you so much for dedicating yourself to growing as a poetry reader. So in the past few lessons, we've talked about narrative poetry, we've talked about humorous poetry. We've also unpacked that we really have to make sure we're paying very close attention when we're reading these beautifully wrapped packages we call poems. There's a lot of stuff wrapped up perfectly and beautifully in a poem. When we're paying attention, we're going to be paying attention to the structure of a poem, the layout of a poem. We're going to even listen for rhyme, but we really have to make sure that we're reading with our punctuation, pausing at commas, periods, and changing our tone on maybe questions or exclamation marks. So before we move forward, I wanted to give you just a couple more examples of these things in different poems. So this is a tiny poem about a fox, and listen carefully to where I pause, because it doesn't necessarily follow the structure right here, but listen to the punctuation. Fox, nearly a myth, his shady mask, his flickering feet, his fiery tail, streaking the dark light of famous comet, famous but seldom seen. Wow, that tells us a lot, and how I read it was really specific to where I saw commas. It's really telling us a lot about a fox. Its shady mask, so we know it has dark over its eyes. Its flickering feet. Its fiery tail, bright red, big, fluffy. Famous, but seldom seen. Wow, they are kind of sneaky. Way to go, Valerie Worth. I love that poem. The structure and the punctuation were really different in this poem. The other thing I'd like to read to you today, and I want you to listen for rhyming words, is from the book I Heard It from Alice Zucchini, Poems About the Garden. And this is by Juanita Havil. So this one is called Instructions. And so as I read it, I want you to listen to the rhyme. Instructions. Plant seeds early in the spring when the ground is warm, 2 inches deep in the wet-tilled soil where they'll be safe from harm. Let the sun and the rain pour down. Be careful where you hoe. A miracle's taking place. Seeds split and start to grow. So in that last stanza, I could definitely hear that something rhymed with grow. And it was this: be careful where you hoe. A miracle is taking place. Seeds split and start to grow. Hoe and grow. Wow, what great details about gardening. So, readers, we've already learned a lot, and now we're going to jump into another type of poem, a lyrical poem. And then we're going to come back to this anchor chart and add to what we pay close attention to. So let's review what a lyrical poem is all about. So a lyrical poem is like a song. It can rhyme, and it really expresses strong feeling. And we talked a little bit in the very first video that sometimes poems are used by musicians. I think you already know of a very famous lyrical poem. I'll give you some clues and let's see if you can figure it out. All right, back in September, on the 14th of September in 1814, a man named Francis Scott Key was a little bit of a poet, and he wrote a famous poem, and eventually it was set to music. In 1916, President Woodrow Wilson announced that this poem, now put to a song and music, would be played at every official event. Can you guess what it is? Well, on March 3rd, 1931, it was adopted as our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, started as a poem. Music was later added, and now today we all sing it at all of our official events. What a great example of lyrical poetry. A poem that can be put to music, it has some rhyme, and it expresses a really strong feeling. All right, readers. So now that we've switched out the poster, I wanted to add to what we have to pay close attention to as I read our mentor text, Gone, the Other Silly Dilly Sports Stories. So before we jump into this, let's add a few more things that we need to pay attention to when we're reading any poem, but especially, for example, in our lyrical poem. All right, readers, so now that I've switched out the poster, do you see the two new things we have to pay close attention to? They're right there at the bottom, pattern and rhythm. So as we dive deep into a lyrical example, I want you to think about pattern. Do things repeat themselves? Do you see something similar between each stanza? Are there any links and patterns to when rhyming words happen? The next word is rhythm. So naturally, when you think about a song, it's got a beat, right? That's how it's put to some music. A lot of poetry, though, has rhythm. It has the same sort of pattern and pace and syllables to create a rhythm to how the story is read. So I'm going to read you from our mentor text, Going, Gone, and Other Silly Dilly Sports Songs. And I want you to listen to see if there's any patterns that you can find and any rhythm you can catch on to. The rhythm for this poem kind of is told to you by the author. They want it to be played to a tune of Take Me Out to the Ball Game. But this poem is called Dad Took Me to Go Fishing. Here we go. Listening for any patterns, things that happen over and over again, and rhythm, the flow of how it's read. Does it have a beat? Dad took me to go fishing. That's why we're on the lake, holding a rod with a hook and bait. That's all you do, you just sit here and wait. Dad says fishing's really exciting. I guess no one told the fish. So we're going to sit here all day. Let's go home, I wish. Not a bite in 2 hours. Dad tells me to be still. He says I chase the fish with my squirms. Maybe they just aren't hungry for worms, and I'll wait a bunch longer until I'm 60 years old. Though it seems all I'm going to catch is a rotten cold. Finally, Dad says we're finished. Finally, he says we're done. He said we'd catch dinner, so he heads for the fish department at our grocery store, and the clerk threw Dad a large sea bass, which he, of course, promptly bought. So when he gets home, he can show Mom the fish he caught. Well, that was my best shot at a lyrical poem called Dad Took Me to Go Fishing, to the tune of Take Me Out to the Ball Game. So these poems are really hard to find, but as you start to read your poetry today, please make sure that you're paying close attention to the structure of it, the layout of it, and you can do that before you even get started. You can even sometimes find patterns before you even get started. But as you start to read, really try to find rhyme, read it with the punctuation, and also see if you can catch on to a rhythm by finding that rhyme and using that punctuation. All right, readers, now it's your turn to dive deep into your poems and press pause at this moment. When you're done reading for the duration that you need to each day, join back in and I'll read you one more lyrical poem just for fun. See you soon, readers. Welcome back, readers. I hope you found some amazing poems today as you were reading, and I found one more amazing book that I wanted to share with you that's an example of some lyrical poetry, Carnival of the Animals. And there was a very famous musician in 1886. He published music called Carnival of the Animals, and now recently many famous poets got together and created poems, lyrical poems that matched the music. So here's an example of me just reading a poem called Aquarium. And what's really special is if you can find this book at your library, you can listen to this poem being read with the music in the background. So here's the poem, Aquarium. Flashes of fish, quick flicks of tails, scoot, scurry, scamper of scattering scales. A sponge blows bubbles, seahorses race, anemones wave tentacles of slow pink lace. A whale of a sailfish unfolds a fin, fans of whiskery walrus with a double chin. A shovel-head shark grins, his mouth underneath, like a cave full of stalactites, steel knife teeth. The ocean brims over with creatures, it seems, that swim past my eyes like remembered dreams. From behind glass, a couple of curious squid stare out at me. What's that odd thing? A kid? Written by X.J. Kennedy. Thank you, readers, for growing as readers of poetry. You did a great job today, and I look forward to seeing you in our next video. Bye-bye.